Hello and welcome to episode 7 of the Responsible Edge podcast with me, Charlie Martin. The Responsible Edge podcast is your go-to source for lessons in how to implement ethical and effective marketing practice. Today, I was delighted to be joined by Michelle Mayther. Michelle is a fractional CMO and the founder of the Green Marketing Academy. She helps impact-focused brands deliver their marketing in a way that encourages conscious spending and consumption. And she is absolutely fantastic. So really delighted to have Michelle on today's show. In today's conversation, Michelle and I focused pretty much exclusively on the sustainable nature of marketing itself and advertising itself in terms of the impact that the activity has on the environment and sort of issues and concerns around that. So really interesting conversation for anyone out there that's looking at kind of specifically their marketing or advertising activity and how to make it more sustainable in of itself. So really delighted that that Michelle joined us to share that. Some really lovely headlines in there from her, and some really great advice for any young marketers out there, specifically related to how sustainability actually is something that starts with ourselves and the way that we approach our managing of our workload. So really delighted to have Michelle on. Hope you guys enjoy the conversation. And again, as always, if you've got any thoughts or comments, we'd absolutely love to hear from you. So please feel free to add those onto any of our posts, etc. Thank you. Michelle, well, let's kick off then. And start things there. So thank you, first of all, thank you so much for, as I say, jumping on and joining us today on episode 7 of the Responsible Edge. Just really keen to kind of, give everybody a bit of a flavor of you and your background. So if you wouldn't mind just giving us an overview of your career, that would be fantastic.
Sure. My name is Michelle Mayther, and I'm based in Seattle, Washington in the US, and I am a fractional chief marketing officer and also the founder of the Green Marketing Academy, which is an educational platform that teaches marketing professionals on how to adopt more sustainable, ethical, and inclusive marketing practices.
Michelle, that was so smooth. That was unbelievable. I mean, that was as smooth as it gets in terms of an introduction. So we're gonna have to try and you can't be as smooth as that all the way through. I'm afraid that's going to put me in a completely different light. Let's row back a little bit. Would you mind just talking us through? You mentioned what you're kind of doing now, but just a bit of your history. Kind of, you've always been based in that area of the US. In terms of your earlier part of your career, what did that look like?
I started my marketing career right out of college. I majored in graphic design and always still love designing, branding. That's more of my background, but dove into the corporate marketing world in the US right out of school. I spent the last 12 years or so in different corporate marketing and some sales capacities. And there was one particular trade show that I was responsible for putting together. I think this was back in 2012 or so. And I remember getting to the trade show and I was so excited that I had designed all the materials, all the catalogs, and people started coming by our booth and grabbing, the different branded swag items and the different data sheets I had created, and they stuffed them in their branded tote bag that they got at the entrance. And then that sense of pride or joy quickly turned to sheer despair when I saw not one, not two, but hundreds, probably maybe even thousands of people. It was a pretty big show, walking out of the conference hall at the end of the day and throwing their entire tote bag with all the things they had collected right in the trash, not even bother to recycle it or anything like that. And I was horrified. And I thought, wow, we are at one trade show in one city, in one country, and conferences and trade shows happen every day around the world. And I could almost just visualize this pile of landfill forming before my eyes. And I thought, wow, I had never thought about how much waste just marketing itself can produce, let alone whole businesses. And I knew someday that I wanted to start my own company. And I thought, I will make a pledge to dedicate part of my business to educating people on there has to be a better way to market your business in an ethical and effective way, but without all the waste.
Super interesting, Michelle, and it's like we had a preamble before this, and you knew what my next question was going to be, which is very good. But how you mentioned there about your graphic design past. I mean, I would say for anybody that wants to see some with Minty Maid and the Green Marketing Academy, is that your hand? Have you created that from a branding
Yes.
perspective? I have to say, anyone listening to this, check out Minty Maid and the Green Marketing Academy for some absolutely top-notch branding. It's beautifully done. Anyone that's got an eye for design will appreciate what Michelle's put together there. But Michelle, coming back to your point, when you were thinking about, and I just want to create that clarity in your mind. I can see how the Green Marketing Academy is very much a manifestation of what you've just described, i.e., that's the part of your business that's really focused on helping people implement kind of more sustainable marketing practices. In terms of Minty Maid, just to give that a plug, what's the area of focus for Minty Maid as an agency?
That's more of the foundational branding pieces. So the brand strategy, the visual branding itself, the market launch planning. I've found over the last 5 years or so working with different clients, whether it's on their visual branding identity or their packaging, that once they get to the point where they're launching their new website, we've worked with them up until that point of launch, and then they sort of ask, well, now what? How do I carry through that success with a solid marketing strategy? So that's where we help them with the foundations all the way through. How do we keep growing the business in a way that really caters to their ideal audience? And then the design part, I do a lot of just sustainable packaging consultations, because as another designer friend of mine always says, sometimes we feel like we're just designing pretty trash. There was that whole movement for years, and it still happens now, where there's so many just beautiful, glossy packaging created just for the look and feel and the brand experience, but that's not necessarily helping the planet in any way.
That's really, I mean, that is as a kind of a spoof marketing agency's like landing page. You can imagine, we design pretty trash as being a fairly playful way of introducing what you do. I've got lots of questions on that. Do you think that I sometimes feel that it's almost like you get that thing where, don't you, with C-level individuals, especially, who will turn around and they want something to feel, to touch, to have, and it almost has no kind of external thought or consideration about the impact this is going to have from a marketing perspective, but they just want to have that moment of being able to hold something pretty intangible associated with what they do. Do you find that in your experience?
Yeah, definitely, that we over deliver on our branding and our marketing sometimes, because yes, it's going to create an impression of that brand straight away when you open a package, if it's a product-based business, but that satisfaction's only lasting the consumer or the person, 10, maybe 15 seconds, and then they're throwing that box in the trash. And it doesn't have like you had just mentioned, the end of life considerations aren't there beyond just having it look a certain way, either on a shelf in a store or when they're unboxing that product.
And jumping back to something else, that what you said previously really inspired thinking in my mind, in terms of, you've obviously had this moment earlier in your career where you've really like seen the wood through the trees essentially and said, look, like, this is a major problem. And I think that's an amazing experience to have had at that show, to have gone, not even thinking, I guess, from your perspective about like how effective, the show has been from a marketing and sales perspective, but actually just seeing this waste and being totally inspired and horrified at the same time by it. What influence has that experience, and then the creation of Minty Maid and obviously the Green Marketing Academy in kind of association, had upon the mindsets of the type of people that you're working with? Have you noticed that you're now drawn to and drawing to you people that have this kind of mindset that, they're not accepting of the kind of degrees of waste of maybe traditional or other forms of marketing? Has that played out in your experience?
Definitely. When I first launched my own business and my studio, I was concerned, as a newer business, a small business, that putting my sustainability values right up front and center, I would limit myself to the types of clients or people that I wanted to work with. But I found it to be the opposite, that I've had a chance to work with so many incredible brands and bring on, a team to help out with that. And everyone, even if their product or service doesn't directly relate or fit in that sustainability bucket, they still recognize that as, wow, Minty Maid and the Green Marketing Academy are really rooted in these values. And so that helps people come our way from really all walks of life and different industries. And even if it's, like I said, unrelated, they get curious and want to know, okay, with our business model, how do we incorporate more sustainable marketing practices? Because I know we'll dive into the different pieces of that, but there's so much opportunity. And again, that doesn't have to mean that you are designing boring graphics or packaging or not making a profit or reaching your customers. It just has to be done in a more intentional way.
Yeah, fascinating, super interesting. I actually spoke on another podcast last week where we were talking about like how people seem to have got suckered into this notion, the binary notion of sustainability. You're sustainable or you're not, and it's like
Right.
no. There is like a huge journey and continuum for organizations to go on, and so I guess what I'm hearing from what you just said was that actually, like the clients that come to you at Minty Maid, they might be at the very, very start of their sustainability journey, or they might come to you and be inspired to start their sustainability journey.
Right.
And that both of those scenarios are okay. It's just about having the intent to do something.
Right. And if I can add this too, with the Green Marketing Academy, I really designed this offering or this program to be more of an introduction to sustainable marketing, to welcome all businesses that, like you said, may not even have really started down that path. Because as you know, with the anti-greenwash charter, sustainability can be very intimidating for businesses that don't have all their ducks in a row. And no one completely does, right? So I think it's just more of, I framed it as, come learn about an introduction to sustainable marketing, all of the potential here. And then it's been great to partner with organizations like yourself at the Anti-Greenwash Charter and some other organizations that can really focus on the different parts of sustainable marketing strategies like messaging, packaging, sustainability and manufacturing, all of the different areas. So I want to say, I don't know, the gateway drug to sustainable marketing, if you will, is how I position.
Michelle, I have to say, I've got my producer who is nodding away in the background, absolutely loving the sound bites that you're giving us here. You've just made his job next week incredibly easy by the gateway drug of sustainable marketing. Absolutely brilliant. I've got one more question for you before we move on to kind of talking about the article that we shared with you previously that we want to just touch on. It's a slightly more kind of personal related question, but with your experience, you're working every day in, essentially realizing and helping to achieve like a sustainable outcome, I guess, and influencing a sustainable outcome. How does that relate to your experience personally of sustainability and the things that you do in your personal life? What's the experience between your kind of, because lots of people don't work in a sustainable field, or they work for an organization and then they're like really inspired to go home and like, really implement things on a personal level. And then I'm not suggesting that this is the case with you, but I know that there are other people who, if you're peddling sustainability all of the time within your professional context, it can sometimes it's a hard thing maybe to continue to adopt in your personal life. Just maybe, be interesting just to hear your thoughts on that.
Yes, I'm sure a lot of other maybe listeners can relate to this, and I'm sure maybe you even can, Charlie. But once you start diving into this work, it kind of engulfs your entire life and how you view the world. And it's made me, definitely, as I dove into the research over the last 4 or 5 years, a more responsible consumer. Even when I'm out, at a coffee shop or buying something online, I always take a moment to think, can I run to a local store and get this instead, to save all of I live in Amazon world here in Seattle, instead of just deploying a van to come deliver a box within a box within a box of that item. What does that look like from, an end of life cycle standpoint? When I receive products. And I try my best to invest in the clients that also work with us. So the B Corps, the 1% for the Planet members, and just the businesses that are donating part of their revenue and their profits to these environmental organizations that are really making these mass changes, and just making sure that I'm making my purchasing decisions by, voting with my dollar of where I want my money and investments to go. To give a quick example, I this weekend received there's a brand called Pros. They make custom shampoo and conditioner and hair products, and I received their box. It was a plain brown box, just with, I'm not sure if they're using algae ink or anything, but just black ink, cardboard box. Didn't even have any like filler or tissue paper in it. And it was just cut out with the products, and it was beautifully packaged. I feel like I still had that experience with opening it up, but immediately it said that, this box it's a paper box, so fully recyclable. I folded it up and put it in my recycling bin. And I thought, wow, I don't have to worry about, this uh, glossy foils or all this, peanuts and packaging going into the trash. And it really was a luxurious yet sustainable brand experience for me. So I wanted to shout them out.
I was literally about to say, and such a brand experience that you felt compelled to talk about it on a podcast. So I mean, in
Yeah.
essence, that is achieving. I know we're going to come on to talk about the fact that sustainability is a win-win situation, but that's just a perfect example in terms of marketing ROI. Fascinating, Michelle. I'm aware that we haven't need to get on, but I think I just wanted to make one comment regarding that question about sustainability when you work in sustainability, and then the impact that has perhaps on your personal life. For me, as I've been sort of drawn to and spending more time in this area, I feel really privileged that basically through my work, I'm being subjected to a level of education that enables me to be, as you've alluded to, like far more aware. And I think actually when it really boils down to it, that is it, isn't it? That's the absolute key. And we're fortunate because we get paid to learn. And in many ways, I think that's something that is a real privilege for you and I think.
Yeah, I hope that environmental science classes, I'm not sure how they are in the UK, but become just a core requirement for students in high school and studying at universities, because I elected to take that class in college, but that also just put me on a path to eat, less meat and other ways of doing my part.
Yeah, excellent, excellent. Well, look, that was really interesting, Michelle, and I think we need to probably get you on for another episode where we can just talk exclusively about you and your experience and background, etc. But for today, can we jump on to just having a reflection on the Forbes article that we shared with you before the call? I think it was from May last year, and obviously looking at some of the implications of kind of mass marketing and advertising. Would you mind just giving our listeners just like a bit of an overview, a bit of a flavor of kind of what the article covers and what you picked out as being of particular relevance and interest?
Sure. Yes, I was pleased to see that over 70% of marketers believe that, we have a role in changing the industry and lessening the waste, not only in a tangible form with print and packaging, but with the digital carbon footprint as well. That's something that when I talk about sustainable marketing, people are like, what is the digital carbon footprint? I've never really thought about that. And I would like to see an article. They shared that about 47% of marketing professionals have no plans to reduce emissions. I'm glad to see that that's below half, but I'm interested to see, and I was actually planning on emailing the author to find out, what sort of demographics did this data come from? Because I think that'll speak largely to the perspective and the attitude around that particular statistic.
So you deducing from that you think we're talking more senior marketeers that have
Could be.
been.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I agree
And
with
then
that.
just my other key takeaway, as we were chatting about before the recording here, yesterday was the Super Bowl, and we had a conversation going around the room because right before the game started, me as a marketer, I'm like, hey everyone, fun fact, this year's Super Bowl ads cost $7 million for, I think, 30 seconds or so. And that was mentioned in this article as well. And 80% of Super Bowl ads that they've studied over the last several years don't even drive sales. So it's so interesting that we're still stuck on this positioning your brand in, one of the biggest spotlights of the year, but without expecting an ROI on that. And again, this goes back to just the mindset of mass marketing versus being very intentional and segmented with your marketing. I think if we saw that shift take place, it would just lessen the sheer, quantity of content coming at us, every single second of the day.
Would it be fair, Michelle, to say that when you look at, and again, these are sweeping generalizations here because they have to be, I guess, in this context, but would you just say that there's a lot of laziness going on in the marketing and advertising profession, in the sense that we'll tick that big old box and we've got the budgets and we might get ultimately some brand awareness out of just being there, so we'll invest in some mass marketing activity? Is that have I massively oversimplified things there, or is that, do you think, at play?
I share that perspective as well, that there's a lot of traditional marketers teaching that just, cast your net wide and far, and, doing the math of, I think it's like 1% of your list could be a potential buyer. But again, all of that is, and I'm just thinking of junk mail, which I think was mentioned in this article as well. You're sending out so much content, and maybe 1%, 5%, a small percentage will convert to a sale. But at the end of the day, they're overspending and not seeing that return on investment. So why do we keep approaching it in this way? That's my biggest question. I don't know. I think it's, apart from, I don't know if it's laziness, but just, this is the way that things have always been done. This is the marketing formula that has been tried and true over many decades.
Do you know what? It's so interesting, because that is so, that's inherently, I completely agree, but it is inherently at odds with the creative process.
Right.
I think it was, and I'm so pleased I get to reference him, because he is like an absolute inspiration. I'm going to shout him out, and hopefully he might like or comment or get involved in this in some way. But have you heard of a guy called Dave Trott?
I think so. Sounds familiar.
So he wrote I'll reference this in the article, etc. He wrote a book and did a load of talks called Predatory Thinking. And one of the things that he spoke about in that was like, just I think it was back in like 2014, and the stats came out that like in the UK, 87% of all advertising was just not remembered at all. And I think it was like 6% was remembered like negatively, and it was only 5%, I think, remembered positively. And his point was just like, we've just completely lost the notion of true creativity. Like, why has it got to the point where we're all just peddling the same stuff and we're just trying to shout louder and louder within a room, as opposed to really considering any of the nuance and truly creative ideas that mean that we don't have to spend as much money. We don't have to invest so much in that mass marketing activity. So yeah, it kind of, that felt like that aligned with what you were suggesting there.
Right. Yeah. It was very interesting to see too. Just one more mention on the Super Bowl is, I would say 90% of the ads, commercials that they showed were all influenced by celebrity appearances, different sporting figures, different celebrities from shows. And I'm like, wow, is that just the go-to now, that you throw a celebrity in a commercial and that's the ticket?
Yeah. I'm just referencing Dave Trott again. He does this really interesting X and O analysis, and what you've just described there is that rings perfectly true. I.e., XXX, O, XXX, and realizing the value of actually being creative, but the difficulty of it in this day and age. Fascinating, Michelle. I have to admit, one thing that jumped out at me from that article, and again, I don't know, I just hadn't fully informed myself of this, but I think it suggested that every day there are 7.1 billion unwanted emails that are sent, generating 28,000 tons of CO2 around the world. That really struck it for me in terms of the volume and scale of the issue. Out of interest, in your experience, etc., like what besides obviously the tonnage of CO2 that's emitted, what are the other kind of environmental implications, I guess, or more broader societal implications, do you think, of mass advertising?
I think it just dilutes the brand's message because they're throwing copy sort of like spaghetti at a wall. They're seeing, what sticks, but you have to do so much mass advertising to do the research, which is very important for marketing to make sure, it's resonating with your end users. But I don't think the work is being done up front to really understand who your target audience is. Where are they in the market,
Mhm.
rather than just, again, sending out these messages that may or may not actually reach them, if that answers your question.
No, that answers it perfectly, Michelle. And I think just on that, kind of coming on to that, let's like imagining, I know the article touched upon this, talking about like managing data and how you go about, let's say that you had this clear like persona for your target audience that you were going after. I think what was really interesting in terms of what it was covering there was it was suggesting like ongoing cleansing and management of your
Mm-hmm.
data set in order to understand like, are these customers or these on profile leads that I had generated last year, are they still on profile this? And how that process is absolutely key to making sure that one, you're not marketing to people that don't want to hear from you and therefore ultimately having an impact upon the environment, et cetera, but
Right.
also the impact that's going to have on your ROI from a marketing point of view, i.e., if you're not having to message them, then you're not wasting your money on contacting somebody that doesn't want to hear from you. So can you
Yeah.
just give us a little bit of a flavor of your take and experience on kind of data management and cleansing?
I feel like we're treating people as numbers and not as humans anymore. I receive, and LinkedIn's a great platform, so I'm not here to talk down on it, but I receive so many messages of people that want to connect with me and don't even, I can tell they don't take a second to read my profile or what I do, and just say like, do you need 8,000 leads generated in a month? And just these cold messages going over and over again. And they've done a good job at filtering some of those out, but we're treating this as, again, just spamming, sending out as many messages as we can, hoping that something sticks. But that's not what connects us to a brand or a company at the end of the day. It's that human element. I think maybe I would guess that the pandemic had a lot to do with that, but I feel that there's a shift in the marketing world happen, and it's really important that brands connect back to those human emotions in a positive way, not so much in like a manipulative, like we talked about, predatory tactic type of way. But
Mm.
that's where I think we can really see some great strides in marketing. And like you were mentioning, just making sure that your data list, keeping your audience engaged and making sure that they're receiving something of value to them, because otherwise they're just going to hit the unsubscribe button and disengage fully.
I have interest, Michelle, on that point. Like, and I'm thinking, reflecting on conversations we have with clients that are, I guess, in similar spaces. That whole like quality versus quantity debate. In
Hmm.
terms of like, right, we need to. I mean, I think there's that old adage, isn't there? Like, we do a monthly newsletter. Like, we have to get one out. Like, what's your take on how an organization should go about, like, what are the checks that an organization should have in place to making sure that they are actually sharing things and sending things that have genuine value and quality of content, I guess, to their audiences? Like, how would you advise them to approach that?
Sure. I'm a big fan of market research and surveys. Maybe perhaps it's, a gift card for, or a drawing for a gift card to answer some survey questions about the content that they're receiving. Maybe just offering, yeah, quick 10-15 minute calls with their audience to get a better sense of that, in exchange for a free product or service or something like that. And just making sure that you're always staying relevant. So building those checks and balances with your audience into your regular marketing cadence and your systems, because again, we can get so complacent with, yeah, the monthly newsletter, here's what we share, and maybe we'll see people slowly disengage over time, but if we put the effort into delivering new content or tweaking what we have in a way that makes it even more valuable to them, I think it's a win-win for everybody, because then they can actually look forward to your emails rather than, here come 5 more emails, delete, delete, delete straight away.
Can I totally am on board with that. Can I just play devil's advocate with one scenario, which,
Sure.
and I'm actually thinking about a client that we work with who they, it's a B2B service that's offered. They have a database of a few thousand contacts, and their whole thing is that they just, what they offer isn't necessarily needed, very regularly, if you like, but they just want to make sure that they're in mind of that customer base when that decision comes up. And so from their perspective, and I have to admit, I'm not going to throw them on the bus here, but what they do is pretty dry. It's not the sexiest thing in the world, I'll be honest with you, but they need to get something in front of people just to remind them that they are there.
Yep.
How would you advise that organizing? How do they go about mitigating? Look, we want to send something that's genuinely valuable and genuinely impactful, but equally we have to send something just to be in mind of, our potential customer. What would you advise them to do?
Right. I mean, there are ways that you can market your business without saying, buy this service or this widget. They can, I mean, as we've just gone into, collaborate with other businesses to spread awareness, but they're always seeing that, this email or this spotlight is coming from, the Green Marketing Academy or the Anti-Greenwash Charter. And it keeps your brand front of mind because they see it in their inbox, but without directly asking them to spend money. So it's just the brand awareness piece comes into play. And then another example that I've been talking to I work primarily in B2C brands, but at conferences and at trade shows, there's been a movement away from exhibiting in a booth space to more thought leadership. So sending one of your executives or your thought leaders to a conference to do a talk or share knowledge. And again, that gets you in front of your audience, but in a way that, it reduces waste because you're not just handing a bunch of marketing swag and materials out, but actually delivering value on the knowledge that either your company or that particular brand provides, that's beyond what you're getting as the tangible product or the service.
Does that fill you with hope that's happening more and more, in terms of like going back to that inspirational moment that you had at that show when you were like, oh, look at how much waste there's going on? Does that move towards, well, people being like unaccepting really of that degree of, people are more educated, people are more aware when they go around these shows, etc., of like, why am I being given all of this plastic? Like, why, what is going on here, as opposed to some experience, as you say, of thought leadership and of really good brand positioning? Does that give you hope for the future in terms of these things?
It does, and definitely. And I'll just say too, I've been to several conferences and events now where people are a lot more conscious with calculating their carbon footprint of that event and what they're doing to offset it. Even shows that are not so much in the sustainability industry are making sure that, instead of handing out pieces of collateral, there's a QR code. You can go straight away and download it, or they can email it to you, making sure that they're reducing single-use plastic. So I think the louder we are as marketers about the different ways that you can do this, while still, again, delivering value and expertise in whatever industries we're working with, I think we're on the right track.
And well, that's, Michelle, that is great to hear, especially from somebody who's spent so much time working in the space. Out of interest, when you're slightly changing tack and talking specifically about the Green Marketing Academy now, when a new prospective kind of client comes to you, like what are the key first sort of stages, if you like, of that kind of planning and advice that you would offer to a client around how to begin to adopt kind of sustainable marketing practices?
Sure. Yeah, that's a great question. And with the Green Marketing Academy, most of the members or students that we work with that come in, some of them are marketing professionals that are part of larger marketing teams. Some of them are solopreneurs or they own their own business, and some are, uh, part of a marketing team, maybe for a nonprofit or a larger organization. And we work with people now worldwide. That was a result of just the having to pivot for the pandemic. But I would say the core foundational elements that I always ask each member that comes in and joins us is, what is your why, or what is your organization's why? Why are you doing this work? What are those, 3 or 4 core values that you want to dictate all of the marketing and messaging that you create? And I think that's such a foundational element, because when I invest in a brand or buy something, I immediately go to their, about page. I want to know who are the humans, or who is the human behind this brand or company. What do they believe in? Who are they giving back to? And I think, again, we get so focused, especially here in the US, such a, run by capitalistic measures. We just get so entrenched in, how do we sell, sell, sell? And at the end of the day, it's no different than doing business with a service organization. It's a know, like, and trust factor with another human. I know I have to mention AI, or else what are we doing here? I have to mention AI in 2024 on a podcast. But with that, there's just, we can't lose sight of who we're connecting with at the end of the day. It's not robot to robot. It's human to human.
I love that. We've done so well to get through, majority of our conversation without talking about AI. But you're right; it just wouldn't have been a podcast in 24 without mentioning it. It's really interesting. So I just want to pick you up on that. Do you have clients who come to you within the Green Marketing Academy who are kind of need help and support, maybe through Minty Made, of that branding piece, and kind of heading sort of upstream slightly to, well, what are those 4 like fundamental brand values, if you like, that you want to underpin your marketing? Is that ultimately like how the 2 entities, like, is that the relationship that they kind of have with one another, or is that not so typical?
I would say it's been two different audiences. Some already have established branding, and it's a small business or a marketing professional who feels pretty burnt out just with keeping up with all the different channels. And when I wanted to mention this as well, because it's a pillar of the Green Marketing Academy, is, finding that balance. Because as someone that worked in corporate marketing, I burnt out several times, got sick, or even, broke out in a rash, because I was so stressed out of trying to be on all the marketing channels, write all the blogs, do all the social media. And sustainability really starts with us and our own energy. So that's something that I practice and preach from the beginning, is being intentional with where you're spending your time, and making sure that, you're not spreading yourself too thin. So that's a big element of it as well, no matter if you have your own business or work for a large organization.
Michelle, as I say, you can tell that you work in marketing. I'm not going to lie, because some of your headlines are just absolutely brilliant. Sustainability starts with ourselves. I imagine that you've already sort of given our listeners a pretty solid piece of advice in that. I think there's so much to be taken from that, especially in the kind of just on world we live in these days, especially from a digital perspective. But we always like to finish with a kind of key bit of advice that you'd offer to your younger self or to a junior marketeer. I think that's a lovely one. Feel free to kind of expand on it, or give us something completely new if you wouldn't mind.
Yeah, I've been thinking about this question a bit, and I would say, take your time to research where some of these sustainability claims and statistics are coming from. Because even, you mentioned that so many emails are sent out per day. I remember in first doing my research, I saw a statistic saying that, the number of emails per day exceeds, or it's the equivalent of a number of cars driving on the road, and emitting fumes or whatever. And come to find out that a lot of these sustainability claims are tied back to, making a business case for themselves. So that particular statistic was tied back to a greeting card, a paper greeting card company. So naturally, they would say, "Oh, emails emit a lot of carbon more than you think. Buy a physical greeting card, and sending it through the mail is actually less emissions than this is." So all that to say is look at where some of these claims are coming from. And of course, you can't live your life with just being a skeptic on more or less everything, but make sure that when you're reading articles, you're making sure they're, cited correctly from different research papers and such, because it's very easy, as you know, with the business that you're in, to put a blanket statement on a website or on a package or something that is just blatant greenwashing. And I will say too, and I'm sure you can relate, Charlie, that a lot of greenwashing isn't intentional. It's just people are doing their best with the information that they have. But I challenge all of us as marketers to ask questions, dig deeper. And it's not about shaming anyone. It's just asking the questions so that they can, as a company, they can dig deeper into, oh, we have this question coming from our customers or our clients. Let's dig into this, rather than just dismissing it and know fully well that you are greenwashing.
That absolutely brilliant additional bit of advice. I think it's that interrogation of the evidence, isn't it? It's understanding that it is your responsibility as a marketeer to interrogate your evidence that you've been provided. And I think you make such an interesting point there about, and we've been working with a few clients at the Charter on, the kind of the chain, if you like, of where does the evidence actually originate from? Who influenced it?
Right.
Who paid for that research? Let's get back to that, because sometimes you can't even trust necessarily the entity with which that evidence was delivered. You have to look at who supported the development of that evidence. So it is, and I think you're absolutely right. I think it isn't intentional, but if I'm honest, like, I think a lot of the time it is lazy. And I think that we have to get to a point maybe where we're calling out, like, it. You can say it was non-intentional, but if you just chose not to go down the route of really understanding and interrogating the evidence, that's on you as a marketer. But I think that's brilliant, Michelle. Not to finish it on a down, but I wanted to get my piece across as well. That was absolutely fantastic. I do feel like you and I could rattle on all day. I'm sure our listeners are breathing a sigh of relief that I'm certainly bringing it to a close in terms of me chatting. That was absolutely fantastic. Hope to have you back on again to cover off another interesting aspect of sustainable marketing. But for today, thank you very much for joining us.
Yeah, thanks you for having me.